afternoon. Great to have the after lunch. I can just get some comfortable, close your eyes, have a little nap. So I'll try and keep you awake. Now, some of you may have seen me before. I ran churches tourism projects before I worked for the National Churches Trust, so that's where I'm coming from with this visitor effects on buildings. Okay. So, for those of you who don't know, the National Churches Trust is the only national independent non-profit organisation which is dedicated to promoting and supporting all Christian places of worship of all denominations and all ages across the whole of the UK. So potentially that's about 47,000 buildings. We offer support, advice and funding. We are primarily known for funding for our grant programmes, so we pay grants and community grants. But we have, since 2007 when we became the National Churches Trust, we've been expanding into other kinds of support and advice. You can find out about everything that we do on our website. We've got a brand new website. It's got a brilliant building advice section. Not being biased at all. Okay, so just a quickie of what I'm going to talk about. A little bit about visitors to churches, so you can get to know the landscape a bit. And thinking about what you could do before they come, while they're there, and after they've been, and the effects that they might have had. And then, because quite a bit of that might be quite negative, I thought we'd have a few positives at the end. So I'm not just going to talk about the physical stuff, I'm not just going to mention eroding stonework and littering churchyards and all those other things. I'm also going to talk about people and the effects that people and their reactions to what you do in buildings and all of that kind of thing can also have on the actual structure itself. So as I said, there are over 47,000 Christian places of worship in the UK. There are over 10,000 with medieval origins. They are all unique. They all have a story to tell. They all have something to offer visitors. They all should be, in my opinion, opening up for visitors and encouraging local people and people from far and wide to come and have a look and learn about what they've got. Visitors to churches come from all different backgrounds. They visit for many reasons. It's actually really hard to do surveys of visitors in churches because they come through the door for so many different reasons, and they might not actually even know why they've come through the door, or they might not be able to pinpoint one reason. Quite often they don't also identify themselves as being a visitor or a tourist. So it might include local people, day trippers, special interest groups, Corbin Scout groups, educational groups, schools, and international visitors who might come to see a very specific thing in a church. They might come as part of walking trips, bus tours, on their bike, like Sarah does, come to exhibitions and concerts and all sorts of things. And the fact is that more and more are coming. The number of people visiting churches each year is increasing. In fact, the number of people visiting heritage sites in general is increasing. And churches are on the flip side of that. Churches are looking at tourism and visitors and increased numbers of people coming through the door as a way of both increasing income through donations and sales and that kind of thing, but also as a way of reconnecting with their community, so bringing in local people and engaging them with the building and perhaps encouraging them to take part in maintenance or in activities that they've got on. So here's just a few facts and figures. I'm not going to read them all out because you'll have this presentation, so you can have them. And there's a link to all the reports at the bottom where all the facts and figures are from, so you can use those. But it is a really quite a big sector, and one that you as a person from a church can have a piece of if you want it. Oops. Hang on. Wait a minute. Right, okay, just to make sure we're on the right one. Okay, so opening your door then and welcoming these visitors in, what should you do before they come, or what should you consider in terms of the maintenance of your building? Basically, it's not rocket science, and I'm going to say that 3 times, it's not rocket science. It's quite simple. You can open your door and people will come in because they want to see what's inside. You know, quite often they might not have been able to get in other than on a Sunday morning, and that might have been quite daunting. So sometimes it's literally just opening the door and they'll come in. Other times you might do events, you might do concerts, you might have a wedding or a funeral. All of those instances, you'll have new people coming into the building. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to take a lot of planning, and it doesn't have to take expensive preparation in order to negate some of the negative impacts that a lot of people coming through the door might have, and to safeguard some of the both structural aspects of the building, but also maybe some of the more tangible items or treasures that you might have as well. And as your visitor numbers grow, you can change what you do and also increase what you do to take account of more people. So, in terms of people considerations, first of all, you should really think about making your building special. Now, it already is special, but create a special atmosphere so that when people come in, they can feel that atmosphere. Very often that's already there with churches. But you just need to consider if you've perhaps got an event on, or you've got loud music or something like that, you might need to consider creating that sort of special area, so that quiet place, because that is something that a lot of people who come into churches look for. You should look at telling your stories. So it's not just about architecture, it's about the stories of the people who've used and built and worshipped in that building, and also the community around it. They might not have been part of the church, but they might be buried in the churchyard. If your visitors don't understand those stories and they don't care about them, then they're not going to care so much about the building, which is what you want. You should try and make those relevant to people today. So try and make links with things that are happening today. People tend to protect what's theirs, what they see as theirs. And if they see the church as their building, if the village sees the church as their building, they can be a really big asset to you in terms of physical volunteers to come and do jobs, but also actually just being ambassadors for the building and talking about your church as a cause, as a place that needs funding, that needs help, that needs support. You should also remember your friends. So don't forget your congregation. Talk to them about visitors. Talk to them about the events and things like that you're going to organise. You know, find out how they feel. Find out what will help them to welcome visitors. Because you don't want to alienate them by putting visitors' needs and events first. You should also encourage them to get involved whenever you can. The more people from the church that are involved, the better experience the visitor will have, because they'll get a much more personal experience from your building, and they'll go away then with that feeling that it's something perhaps that they want to engage with. So you can involve them as welcomers, guides. They could make drinks. They could just sit on the door and tick people off a list. There's all sorts of jobs that volunteers can do. Okay, so these are the things that probably you would think about when you think about visitors coming into churches. So the sort of physical things that might happen to the building. And there are lots of things that you can do to reduce the risk of these. So generally inside, you should try and minimise the amount of dirt that comes in. So you could have a doormat, you could ask walkers to take their boots off, or you could provide carry bags to tie around their boots. There's all sorts of different ways you can do it. You can't do a lot about dogs coming with dirty feet, but people, you definitely can. You should look at making vulnerable or problem areas inaccessible. So perhaps roping off brasses in the floor so you don't get lots of people walking over them. Looking at special or weakened areas of floors or seating. Perhaps closing off organ lofts and things like that, places which are particularly sensitive. You should protect vulnerable or fragile features, so embroidery on altar frontals, or if you've got light coloured wood, that kind of thing, carvings. You should try and minimise the threat of theft and vandalism, which happens very, very rarely. It's something that comes up as a big issue for opening for visitors. People always say, oh, what about the security? But actually, a threat of theft or vandalism, or even, something to do with personal safety of volunteers happens very, very rarely. It's something you should consider and be aware of, but it does happen very rarely. There's lots and lots of advice online from EIG. And food and drink. This is an interesting one. You should think really carefully about what you serve and how you serve it and which areas of the church you serve it in. So, if you've had a lovely new York stone floor laid, you might not want to give people red wine and black coffee, because the first one who drinks it and spills it, it can just leave a mark forever. You just have to be careful. Some churches actually don't worry about that, because they say, it's all part of the pattern of age, and the more people that still lying on the floor, the more it ages, and it tells the story of all the fantastic events and things that we've had on in here. So it all depends on your particular viewpoint, really. So outside, you should look at close mowing paths through the grass in churchyards, and ask visitors to keep to those paths where you can. Make sure that they do go to the regularly visited graves, though, if you know what those are, or which ones they are. And if you've got headstones which are in danger of falling or being damaged already, then try and keep the paths at a reasonable distance from them. But you do have to bear in mind, if you've got headstones that people are interested in, the path's got to go close enough, because otherwise visitors will just walk over the grass anyway. So you've got to actually let people see what they want to see. So let's just say minor, not major. So minor alterations to your building might include things like temporary signage or interpretation, exhibitions or other installations. You might have a hospitality corner, so things like a kettle and a few cups and some tea bags rather than a full-blown kitchen. You should be careful that all of those things, if they're fixed to the building, are very carefully done with the right permissions. Where possible, you should make them freestanding. And please try not to put blue tack on stone walls, or knock nails in where you want to put a new picture up, or any of those kind of things. Major alterations. If you're doing a major building project like installing a kitchen or a toilet, then you will have to consider a lot of these things as part of that. So you will have gone through a more formal process. But they could include, welcome desk, display boards, kitchen. Access improvements like ramps, and again, where possible, they should be reversible and not directly or indirectly negatively affecting their heritage or the architectural character of the building. So you can do things like install a toilet in a freestanding pod which sits on the floor of the church rather than is actually built into it. Okay, so while the visitors are there. Okay, again, it's not rocket science. Start small, open the doors, and pay good attention to the people who come in and see what they do. Do they all walk around the same way? Do they all put their a hand on the same carving as they walk past? Keep an eye on them and just see what they do. Not in a negative, CCTV type way, but just sort of observe them and see how they move around the building. You should always count numbers. Not just for these purposes, but also to record what's happened in your building, and also what kind of events are successful, for future planning. And these suggestions that I'm going to go through with, to do with visitors in the building, some of them are useful for general days when the church is unlocked. Because obviously some of your churches will be unlocked dawn to dusk, all day, every day. Some of them are only unlocked for certain events. And some of you will, I suppose, have both, large events occasionally, but open all the time. So the people considerations again. Most visitors to your church will appreciate the fact that it's a spiritual place, and they will appreciate the practices and the traditions that happen in that place. They might not understand them, and they might need them explaining and interpreting, but they will understand that they are in a sacred space. However, you should talk to your volunteers in your congregation, and perhaps to other churches, about how you feel as a group visitors should act in your building. and what you feel might be disrespectful to the building, but also to your community, to your church community, and to your worship. And you shouldn't feel embarrassed about challenging visitors who do, in your opinion, disrespect the space or the building. That might be to do with the heritage. It might not be anything to do with the worship. You know, it might be to do with the fact that it's an old building and they shouldn't bang up against the walls. But you know, you shouldn't feel bad about asking someone to take their coffee cup off the altar, for example. But sometimes volunteers need to be told that that's okay. You know, it's okay to challenge somebody. And there are ways that you can do it that don't have to be challenging. So it's just about talking about how you feel, you know, making sure that you've all got the same sort of perspective, agreeing on a compromise between you, and then talking about how you're going to approach it if it does happen. You should also make time for worship. It's why your church exists, and it shouldn't come secondary to the visitors' needs. You can think about integrating it into open days or events. I was at Crossland Chapel recently, and they have tens of thousands of visitors every year. They do a very interesting thing where they let most people just wander around. I think on the hour they do a little talk. So if you want to sit down for the talk, you sit down in the pews and you listen to the history, you know, the history and heritage talk. But visitors are milling around you all the time, and then twice a day they stop for prayers where they do the same thing. You know, visitors are still walking around, but they make sure that the prayers are part of the day every day. You can also make worship an experience. You could do a medieval service or something like that. Okay, so building considerations. Generally do things like label light switches and encourage visitors to turn them off. Turn them on and use them, but turn them off. So they don't trip over and, you know, knock things over and that kind of thing. Try and use your welcomers to spread the load, send visitors in different directions. Try and discourage them all from going the same way around and touching the same things at the same time, you know. There'll be places where they say, oh, you see this nice round-up thing, that's where every visitor that's been for the past 60 years has rubbed their head on the gnome or wherever it is. So try and keep guided tours to small groups. That can help. Both the tour is better for the visitor because they're smaller groups, but also it helps stop spread of people. So I think one of these pictures, you can see how they're looking at a particular gravestone, but they're actually spread quite widely across the churchyard. And time guided tours quite carefully to avoid busy times. So if you know, if you're having an open day and you know that you're going to have a really busy time at 11 o'clock, don't also plan a guided tour for 11 o'clock. And general outside things are, consider the people outside the church. So things like parking, will the pub across the road be full so the locals can't get in and get a drink? Will there be a lot of noise with people leaving? Will there be litter outside the church? All of those kind of things. So consider the wider community. Now the after effects. So again, not rocket science. Always review and evaluate every event and every activity that you do. And if the building is just open dawn to dusk every day, every 3 months or so, and review what's been happening. Think about, again, your local community, and think about partnerships and wider community benefits that could come as a part of you opening up and having events. You might be able to have a special lunch at the pub, which means that some of the income from visitors goes to them. If you are planning a huge event, then do consult with the community so they know what to expect. I think it's really important to realise that negative local feeling will last a lot longer than negative visitor feedback. And those local people are the ones who you might rely on later on, either to get up a ladder and clean your gutter, or to put their money in the pocket, their hand in their pocket, and pull out some money for your new roof, or all those other things that you might want to engage with them with. So keep them on side. The building considerations, you should look at, if any damage is caused, you should try and address it immediately, even if that's just a case of, sticking a little notice up saying, yes, we've noticed that this little piece of stone has been knocked off and we've got somebody dealing with it. So people know that those things have been addressed. And assess wear and tear regularly. So again, maybe quarterly, look at wear and tear. And use those assessments to actually consider changes to your procedures in the future. Make sure that you don't get recurring problems coming back. Okay, so some positives. Visitors are great, and you can get lots out of opening your church up and welcoming people in. There are huge benefits that you can find. First of all, you all have churches which are unique and have something to sell to visitors. Sharing your church and its stories is not just good for visitors, it's good for you. It enables you to go away and learn about the building, learn about those stories, and the actual engagement that you get when you talk to visitors, is absolutely brilliant. When you do it one-to-one with visitors and you get somebody who's really enthusiastic and wants to learn everything that you've got to tell them, it's brilliant as a volunteer. It can help you encourage wider engagement with your community and with local people. So you might be able to build those partnerships when you're having special events. You might get sponsorship for flower festivals, or you might get a local pub to bring in the beer for a beer festival. That may lead to support in the future in terms of financial support and skill support. It might help you get people to join your friends group, or even your PCC if you have people from outside the church on it. It could increase your income through donations from visitors, but also through sales. We have an arrangement with Just Giving, where you can have a free Just Giving page through the National Churches Trust, and it's well worth doing it. It gets you free just text giving numbers and all sorts of things. So if you're interested in that, talk to me later. That's a really good way of engaging with visitors and getting some money out of them. It can increase your access to grants and other funding. A lot of funders, including HLF and us, ask what you're doing beyond just the repair. We want to see that the buildings are used and open for people to enjoy. It can reduce theft or vandalism. An open church with people present is much safer and more secure than a locked one. You only have to talk to EIG to know that. And it can have huge benefits for your wider community. It can increase income, it can preserve local services that perhaps just the small number of local people might not be able to preserve, so post office, local shop, that kind of thing. It can increase demand for local food and crafts. It can bring a huge amount of money into the economy, so it can be hugely, hugely beneficial to welcome visitors. So I hope I haven't been too negative. It's mostly a case of just being aware of what might happen and discussing, with your team the potential, so that if something does happen, you've already got a plan kind of in your head so you can deal with it. It's not going to be a complete shock.